open up their 2022 football season against the Murray State Racers, and they'll do so with a fresh face at slot corner as Keyon Blankenbaker joined the program today. I'll take a look at the Murray State game and preview that, as well as take a look at what Blankenbaker can bring to the table for Texas Tech on today's episode of Locked On Texas Tech.
Are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Texas Tech. It's a nice Friday afternoon here, and I'm ready to talk about some Texas Tech football. I'm Emory Lyda, your host. We're going to be talking about Murray State and their program today as we get set with about less than 3 months to go until the start of the 2022 football season and the Joey McGuire era. We're also going to be taking a look at Keyon Blankenbaker, as he is a transfer from Wyoming that just announced his commitment to the program today. But first, I just want to let you guys know that today's episode is sponsored by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them that Locked On sent you. And as we get set for the 2022 football season, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking a look at each of the opponents on Tech's schedule, starting out with Murray State, going all the way through Big 12 play, giving a good look at each of the opponents once a week and I'll provide what I think they bring to the table as an opponent, sort of some of their strengths and weaknesses, and then take a look at some of the things Tech can do to maximize their approaches into the game, as well as taking a look at what you guys think is the most likely outcome of the game. That's something that I pulled on Twitter last night, so thank you to everyone that responded to the official Locked On Texas Tech account and the poll that I put up there. If you did not, next week I'll be running the same thing on Thursday night to see what you guys think is the most likely outcome in the Houston game. But in the Murray State game, I guess it's good to start out with just a general overview of what the program has done. This is a team led by head coach Dean Hood, who has been around the Kentucky, Ohio Valley sort of area for a long time. I mean, this is probably one of the most tenured coaches in the area. He's 65 years old. Obviously, Murray State, not a program known for a lot for their football. Obviously, their basketball side of things is really, really good. We've seen Ja Morant come through there on the basketball side, but the football program a little bit more anonymous in the FCS ranks. Obviously, they play in the Ohio Valley Conference. They have 8 conference championships over the years. And Dean Hood specifically, he is in his second year with the program. Last season, they went 6-5. The year before that, in a COVID-shortened year in the spring, they went 5-2. So they're a team that has a fair bit of success. And Dean Hood came from Eastern Kentucky all the way up until 2015. He had a really solid tenure there. Made the playoffs in the FCS ranks 3 times before losing in the first round every single one. Eventually, I believe, got fired from the job in 2015. Moved on to Charlotte for the 49ers Club Lit, where he served as Brad Lambert's assistant head coach and tight ends coach for a couple of years. Moved on to Kentucky in 2017, where he worked as a special teams coordinator until he got hired at Murray State. So this is a guy that, outside of the tenure at UNCC, has basically been in the area for the last 15 years of his career. So knows how to recruit. They've brought in a lot of talent. Last year they went 6-5. It's important to note they did play 2 FBS teams on the schedule in Cincinnati, who we now know went to the college football playoff last year and was one of the best teams in the nation, and Bowling Green, who is not one of the best teams in the nation, but had an improved season last year after years in the gutter. They lost both of those games. They lost to Cincinnati 42-7. They lost to Bowling Green 27-10, And so this is a team that, outside of those 2 losses, only lost 3 games against FCS opponents. They were in contention to win the Ohio Valley, but a couple of really tough losses. Lost to Tennessee State late in the season, then rattled off 3 straight wins to finish off conference play 3-3. So this is a team that has a fair bit of talent. They ended the season on a high note, and the thing that I want to let you guys know is that this is a team that has a lot of returning players. I mean, you look at the guy that started the last 6 games at quarterback for them in DJ Williams. He is kind of the headliner for this team, a dual threat quarterback. Looking at their statistics from last year, he is probably the standout guy on the sheet. He only started, like I mentioned, about 6 games, ended up throwing 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. That in itself doesn't look all that good. 6.8 yards per attempt, though, is pretty decent for a quarterback. This is not a really pass-heavy system. They ran a lot more than they passed. And his running numbers are really impressive. For someone that was basically a spot player for the first half of the season, to come on strong and end up rushing for over 500 yards, it was really impressive. Ended up with 6 touchdowns as well, 6.4 yards per carry. I mean, this is a guy that is going to prepare you very well for some of the dual threat quarterbacks you're going to face later on in the season in conference play. Thinking about a guy like Adrian Martinez, for example, someone that really can utilize their wheels very well. I think you can make the argument that Williams as a runner was on pace to have a 1,000-yard season had he started the whole season. A lot of optimism just reading through the notes of their spring game and kind of watching a little bit of film. There's a lot of optimism about his improvement as a passer. Had a nice touchdown pass in that spring game. So he's someone that is going to be looking to develop in his second year in the program, or his third year in the program, second year playing in the program. This is someone that has experience as a starting quarterback, so it's not like they're breaking a new quarterback. So it's good to see there. The other guy that they returned that's pretty crucial is DeMonte Witherspoon. Their leading rusher from last year had 912 yards on the season, only 4.3 yards per carry. It's a little bit underwhelming, but again, that was kind of deflated by the performances against Cincinnati and Bowling Green, where they really kind of struggled to face the physicality, especially against Cincinnati. I mean, looking at their schedule compared to the rest of the year, you could say that Cincinnati game was probably the biggest outlier. As in those 2 games combined, Witherspoon only had 90 yards. The rest of the season, he cranked off 3 100-yard games and I believe had 6 with over 80 yards. So clearly a guy with a lot of talent in that sense. Doesn't really provide a whole lot as a pass catcher, although like I mentioned, this team really doesn't use a lot of passing opportunities. I mean, he only had 18 catches, which was still 4th on the team. But outside of Lamartez Brooks, who does return again, another key name to mention, he is their leading receiver from last year. So he returns, and you have the quarterback, the running back, the receiver. You also have your second running back in Cortez Jones, who also returns. And for good measure, Preston Rice is another quarterback that they utilized last year, although Rice was the guy that got benched for DJ Williams, who ended up being really underwhelming. I mean, he started, I believe, the first 5 games of the year, ended up having 1 touchdown to 10 interceptions, 9 sacks, and not to cap it all off, was not the runner that Williams was. So the quarterback change clearly ignited their offense, and the only game that he played after Williams took over was that game that I mentioned against Tennessee Martin, I believe, which they lost, and that was their only loss down the stretch of the season. So it was pretty clear that you could see the improvement that came along with changing quarterbacks. I mean, Williams is a guy that had a lot of success passing the ball compared to what the other guy was able to provide. And talking about Rice and just in general, like this is a guy that really, looking at how he ended the year last year, I think is going to be kind of the ignition for their offense. They put up over 20 points all 3 of the last 4 games, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider that they started the year off in conference play really struggling, only putting up 22 on the board against Eastern Illinois, only having 6 in a loss to Austin Peay. Obviously, the loss against Cincinnati and Bowling Green, where they failed to crack 10 points either time, is frustrating, but it's a good team. Defensively is where they made their money last year. Had a lot of games where they held opponents to single digits or 10 or less. They had 3 of those. And in general, a lot of their wins in conference play were of the low-scoring variety. So a team that has a lot of capability. They do lose more on the defensive side of things, but it is worth noting that one of the guys that they returned that is going to be an impactful player for them and someone that was really valuable in the spring game was Quinaz Turner, a guy who returned a pick 6 in that game. He was their second corner last year, and he returns this year, should be the main guy. Kind of a boomer bust player, a little bit of a ball hawk when it comes to his play style defensively, and aggressive defender. So he'll have some pass interference, guys. It looks like a little bit of a grabby sort of player from what I saw on the bit of tape that I watched. So that'll be worth noting. But certainly this is a team that offensively has a lot of athleticism. Obviously, Williams being a dual threat adds to the capability. Going to run the ball a fair bit. That seems to be their DNA. A lot of similarities in that sense to what we saw from Montana State in 2019. That was another team that really kind of utilized the running game to sort of make their offense happen, using a dual threat quarterback, couple running backs. Their receiving core was versatile, had the ability to impact the rushing game as well. Similar stuff there, although I think Hood's offense is more sort of predicated on pure downhill running and sort of utilizing the power run game. So that's going to be something to watch and how Tech does against that. Obviously, they should have a pretty massive advantage on the offensive line and in the trenches in general, but it'll be worth watching. So that's sort of the Murray State side of things. If you want more preview, we will have more coverage of that as we get closer to the game coming up into game week. But this is just kind of a rough outline of what their team brings to the table. In the meantime, coming up next, we're going to be talking about what Texas Tech can do on their side of things at the start of the game, as well as my way too early prediction for the game. But hey, it's a podcast. I have to give my prediction. I can't just leave you guys hanging on that. So I'll give my early prediction for this game. But first, we have a message from BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline.net is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We have an important favor to ask you. We've put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcasts. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. Again, that is lockedonpodcast.com/survey. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes a survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thanks for your help, and thanks for listening to Texas Tech every single day. Now, taking a look at Texas Tech's side of things when it comes to the Murray State game, this is obviously going to be a game that is probably your most winnable of the season in the fact that if you don't win this game, it is going to be very disappointing. So the Texas Tech side of things, you have to look at it from an improvement standpoint, getting off to a nice start to the season, hopefully getting a good test of your depth, being able to utilize all three of the quarterbacks in some capacity. That would be ideal. But for now, I would say the three main goals for this game should be, number one, get a better idea of the quarterback situation and the receiver situation. I say the receiver situation because you have a lot of pieces there, especially on the outside, whether it be J.J. Sparkman, like Fungi, Brady Boyd. Obviously, you have some more guys as well in the fray there, Jerron Bradley. But all of those guys are going to be fighting for playing time. So if you can get a good idea of just how you want to balance those guys, whether it be from a rotation standpoint or simply who has the edge in the position, that's the first thing. And on the quarterback side of things, that's the thing that everyone's going to be paying attention to heading into the first game. Because it's very plausible if there's one game where you want to run in with a dual quarterback or even a three quarterback system, this is the game to do it. Because Murray State on paper should be the weakest opponent you face. Yes, even weaker than Kansas. So this is the perfect game to sort of get a good idea of who should be in that position. And whoever wins the starting job for the first game, this is their chance to start the game and get a good feel for it, can get their position solidified. But you can also run those different quarterbacks out, see who does the best and who fits well. So object number one of the game, get a better idea of the quarterback picture. Hopefully you're not in a close game and you can afford to rotate guys in and out. I don't want to be doing that in the fourth quarter of a close game, but if it's as lopsided as it could be, then you would expect to see that sort of rotation going on. The second thing that I would say is important to keep an eye on, and I alluded to it a little bit in the first segment, is stopping the quarterback run game and the run game in general of Murray State, because this is something that you're going to see quite a bit in the next upcoming games. Obviously, starting out with NC State, you have Devin Leary, who is a little bit of a dual threat quarterback, not someone that you would expect to be too much of a dual threat guy. Clayton Tune for Houston's another one that isn't really a massive dual threat guy. But then you get into the media conference schedule. Obviously, Quinn Ewers, not exactly sure what he's going to bring to the table. But Kansas State, you have Adrian Martinez. Oklahoma State, you have Spencer Sanders. Moving down the line, TCU, should they go with Max Duggan? That's going to be another running threat. We've seen what he's done to Tech the last couple of years from a running standpoint. Then you look down the line beyond that. Kansas, depending on who they start with, Daniels would be another guy. that could be a real dual threat factor. And then Dylan Gabriel, not really someone that you want to watch too much with his legs, but someone that can move around the pocket very well, extend plays, kind of an improv player. So containment and run support against quarterbacks is something you're going to get a good idea of from this first game against DJ Williams, because he on tape looks electrifying. He can blend in the power with a good bit of agility. He's going to be one of the most efficient runners you're going to face all season long in the quarterback position. And it looks like they run a fair bit of power option game as well. So you add all those things together, and the run support, specifically on the quarterback position, is where I would be putting my emphasis on. The running backs as well. Obviously, I talked about Witherspoon earlier in the game or in this podcast, but in this game, the offensive line for Murray State, you would have to imagine, is a little bit of a weak point compared to Texas Tech's defensive line. So you would expect guys like Jalen Hutchins at the nose to be able to have a really nice game, as well as Krishawn Merriweather coming up from the linebacker position. So you're going to have some advantages on that front. So it's going to be hard to kind of give a good idea, but you can always sort of get an idea of how the quarterback containment is going just from looking at these early season games, because the quarterback running is less dependent on the offensive line, at least comparatively speaking. I mean, obviously, you're still going to see some level of declining effect because of how the offensive line performs, but the option game opens up more variables. And the third and final key that I'm going to look for, and this is going to sound extremely cliche, and I know I'm really sorry because I hate doing cliche stuff, but third and final key is playoff work orders. Don't suffer any sort of massive fallouts. Even if the guys that are in the depth pieces are struggling, still continue to compete hard, still run your offense, get a good feel for things. Again, this is a brand new era, new coaches on both sides of the ball. You've got new faces offensively. Eric Ezukamo's gone. Caitlin Geiger's gone. Henry Columbi is gone. So many new faces, new positions as well for guys like Xavier White and Shardarius Townsend. Miles Price is going to be the guy at slot receiver by all accounts, and that is a new role for him because he's sort of been a rotational piece previously. So a lot of things to keep track of. Offensive line, it's unsure exactly how that's going to fit together. You know, guys like Cole Rogers are going to be playing quite a bit, but still, it's going to be important to make sure that everything is put together. So I would be really intrigued to see how Tech is able to play out this game. If they can get a good lead at halftime and continue rotating guys in and everyone is able to play competitively, that's going to tell you a lot, because this first year, again, I mentioned it on the Expectations podcast that I recorded a couple of weeks ago. It's going to come down to what does the program look like? How are guys finishing games? And just in general, what the atmosphere around the team is like going forward. So a good, strong opening, playing all four quarters, that's going to be key. And if you look at how people have been looking at this game and what they believe is the sort of most likely outcome from the poll that I ran on Twitter, as I was mentioning in the opening, we got a solid number of responses. And basically, the consensus is Tech is going to win this game. 93% of people pick Tech to win the game. A solid 83% pick them to win by 16 or more, and 43% of the responses pick them to win by 31 points or more. So 31 points is a lot of points to win by. It's worth noting that the last few years, looking at Tech's opening games or their bye games, the only games where they've won by over 31 points, they won by exactly 31 against Montana State. You had UTEP in 2019, which was a game against probably the worst FBS team at the time. Obviously, they got a bit better over the course of that season, but still not a great team there. You won by 33 against a really bad FIU team last year, a team that ended up being really bad. And then you also had a game you had a game in 2018 against Lamar where you won 77-0. But as a general rule, you've had your fair share of close calls the last 3 years again in those bye games. You had a Montana State team where you won by 31, but it wasn't necessarily a blowout. It was one of those things where Tech slowly pulled away over the course of the game. Then the real scares, which I want to talk about, is the last 2 years against your FCS opponents. The Tech was able to beat Houston Baptist by 2 points against the Zach Kitley-led offense, 35-33 in 2020. In 2021, possibly the worst game I think I've watched the Texas Tech team play against Stephen F. Austin. They almost lost that game. Stephen F. Austin was not a great team per se. Obviously, I believe they made the playoffs last year, but still not a team you want to be going all the way down to the wire in a game where Tech really should have lost that game. by all accounts. Tyler Shuck had 3 interceptions in that game. You had a lot of struggle, or it's 2 interceptions, but you had a lot of struggles offensively just taking care of the ball. Stephen F. Austin had a chance inside in their own or in Tech territory late in the game, could not get it to go. So looking ahead, this is the game where you are going to have to put your foot down and prove that things have changed from the Matt Wells era. So for that reason, I've got faith in this team. I really like Zach Kitley. I think the offense is going to have a lot of success against a Murray State team that is replacing quite a bit of defensive talent. So I'm going to go with the final score being 52-23 at the time. I think defensively, you have a lot of pieces coming in. Also, having DJ Williams in the fray is going to make things a little bit more tricky for Tech because he is a running quarterback, seems to be very talented on the ground. That's going to play into Murray State's favor. So I'll put Murray State scoring 23. Worth noting, I think some of those are going to come in garbage time where Tech's defensive depth is going to be challenged a little bit. But there is a piece out there that is coming in that we learned about today that is really going to help out with the depth, and that is Keyon Blankenbaker from Wyoming, and I'm going to talk about him next. But first, I have a message from our title sponsor of today's episode, in Rock Auto. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. To save time and money while using Rock Auto, why would you choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership, when you could simply use the wide variety of parts from Rock Auto? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have reliably low prices for every customer, and you can go explore their website today and find any solution that you need to your auto part needs. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. And Keyon Blankenbaker is a guy that rocked on at Wyoming the last 4 years, someone that had a lot of success in the Mountain West Conference, had a couple really good games in 2018 and 2019. He's someone that's played now in 4 different seasons. Only got to play, I believe, 3 games in 2020 because of a shortened schedule in the Mountain West, but still someone that has played over 1,000 snaps at the slot position, 1,700 in total, but over 1,000 at the slot, including over 500 last year. No stranger to a lot of success at the college level. He's one of Wyoming's top 10 defenders, really, in all 3 of the years where he played crucial amounts of snaps. So Wyoming is losing a good talent in Blankenbaker, and it's really rare to see Tech picking up someone this late in the offseason. I mean, Blankenbaker is a guy with a lot of experience at kind of a mid-tier level. Obviously, the Mountain West is not quite up to par with what the Big 12 brings to the table, but still, this is an addition that you can really see pay dividends because he's 5'10", he has good range for that size, not really much of a ball hawk, but still a really solid player, and you have to think he's going to factor into that slot corner equation. You've got guys like Adrian Fry. You'd expect to see Deidron Taylor-Demerson kind of moving back into the slot some. You also have Muddy Waters as well. I expect those two to kind of play a little bit of slot corner minutes depending on how the rotation plays out. You've also got a couple other guys. Malik Dunlap should play into the fray there. So there's a fair bit of talent in the corner slots there that you would have to expect that Blankenbaker is going to add into. Looking down the rest of the list, you could see Kobe Minor having some sort of impact. It's going to be hard to expect too much. I would expect to see Adrian Fry kind of maybe play more on the outside this season, as that's where he seems to be more naturally comfortable, but we will see on that. But still, regardless, the slot corner position might be the weakest in the secondary as of now from what Tech's defense looks like, and that is what Blankenbaker really specializes in. He's played some snaps at outside corner over the years, also filled in at safety at some point, but this is someone that outside of last year has been really clean in pass coverage, only had 3 penalties in his first 3 seasons total, picked up 5 last season, but some of that could have been down to maybe being a little bit out of shape because of the fact that they only played 3 games in 2020. out of all of the conferences, the ones out west really kind of had the most impact. He was also asked to play more of a versatile role than anything else that he did outside of his very first season. Out of his very first season at Wyoming, played 359 snaps in the slot last year, but also played 116 in the box, where he was more of a rover safety. He's got good run stuffing instincts. He can also be used as a blitzer, which I think is something that is kind of rare to see out of a slot corner. He's not someone that you would necessarily expect to be a pass rusher that gets to the quarterback very often, but still, I mean, he is someone that could put pressure on and has the quick instincts, has the ability to get to the quarterback. We saw it some in 2020 mostly, but really, I mean, Blankenbaker's probably as versatile as you're going to find from the slot. He's someone that has just this random ability to play up in the box, has good run stuffing instincts, and in general, I think he's going to be a guy that you can fit in the slot in certain packages. I don't know if he's going to play as much as he did in Wyoming. Obviously, step up in competition. Tech does have a fair bit of depth in the secondary, but he's a nice piece to add. He should figure into the corner rotation. Reliable in pass coverage. Again, doesn't make a ton of mistakes. His yards per target numbers in 2018 and 2019 were really good. I mean, you're talking about someone that really only allowed less than 8 yards per target. Excuse me, I don't know why I said 5 there, but less than 8 yards per target in his first 2 seasons. And even last year, I mean, he is someone that gave up less than 5. Now, granted, again, those stats are a little bit skewed because he played a lot more in the slot, a little bit more down, or a lot more in the box, a little bit downhill, focusing more on the screen game and more guarding running backs as he played more safety, but still someone that has a lot of versatility in his game. Looks like he has good instincts and a feel for the ball. I'm going to be able to watch more tape later and I can give you a better idea and assessment on his game. But from what I saw, that's kind of just of it. A solid pass cover. He's got good athleticism, pretty rangy for being 5'10", and I would expect that he can play in the box more than some of the other slot options. So a good opportunity for him. I'm happy that he chose Tech. I think it adds to Tech's program, and I'm excited to see what comes next. But that will do it for this week and for the Murray State / impromptu Keyon Blankenbaker preview and review of him as a player. And coming up next week, we'll be talking more. We'll get into the Houston preview at the end of next week, maybe talk a little bit more basketball. Kind of want to talk about the basketball tournament and the Air Raiders that are coming into that tournament with a lot of Tech alum led by guys like Norton Sodiase and Tariq Owens. That's going to be something that we'll talk about. Hope maybe we might even have a potential guest on in the near future, but that's for next week. For this week, I just want to say thank you for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft, where the first picks of the mock draft have been made. Search now for Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and get over 50 insiders, the Odyssey sports experts, the draft experts of Locked On NBA Big Board. You can see what they had to say and what their picks were. The 5-episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway, so make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen today. That's been everything for today. I am Emory Lyda. You can follow me on Twitter at Eraser41. You can follow the official Texas Tech Twitter account, Locked On Texas Tech Twitter account at Locked On TTU. You can also subscribe to our YouTube. I'm back uploading things on there now after a short delay as we've had issues from the technical side. So I do apologize for that. I'm going to try to be releasing some of the episodes from last week and this week in the next couple of days. But for now, that's all, and I will see you next week.